Well, Brian McLaren, what an absolute delight to welcome you to Alignment. And to all of you here today, whether you're attending an alignment session for the first time or if this feels like home for you, we are so glad you're here. And I feel quite sure that you are here because Brian McLaren's work has, or is about to shortly, had an impact on how you make your way in this world. Connected to one another, connected to something greater than all of us, and to our home in this creation, this earth. And Brian, as you say, what you expected to be a call to action in this challenging new book, Life After Doom, ended up including a mystical celebration of energy, attachment, and the cosmic dance. And we're so grateful to share that energy with you and thankful that you are with us here tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Margaret. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you across many time zones, and in fact, maybe across a couple of days. I'm honored to be with you. What I thought I would do is share a little bit in getting us started, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. If a question arises as I'm going along, if you put that in the chat, I'll check in with that at a couple of points through our time together. But I wonder if you all could help me out using the chat right now. And would you just put in where you are from and how's the weather where you are today? And that'll give me a sense of where I'm talking to people and maybe give us all a sense we're all on this beautiful planet together in so many different places. From Lenape land in Philadelphia, quite sunny and hot, and Indianapolis hot, and Germany, nice weather, but 1 a.m. Oh my goodness, thanks for being with us at 1 a.m. Minneapolis, cloudy and 70s. Lubbock, Texas. Of course, it's hot in Lubbock. We would expect that. Philly, sunny and hot. A lot of hot. Hobart, Tasmania. Winter time there, cold and drizzly. Great to have you. And from coastal Alabama, super high heat index in Philadelphia and Williamsburg, Virginia, and Lancaster. Okay, well, very good. Well, I'm in Southwest Florida, where it actually is a beautiful day because every day is about the same here this time of year, 91 to 93 degrees, but a beautiful breeze today. In fact, I was just out taking a walk right before we got together, and it really helps to have a bit of a breeze. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Faith After Doubt, and I realized I gave away all my U.S. copies, but this is what the book looks like. I don't know why it doesn't want to be in focus there, but this is what the book looks like in the British version. And then this year, I have a book that came out called Life After Doom, and I don't know why that. Maybe if I put it in front of my face, it will be in there you go, in focus. What I thought I would do is take main themes of both of these books and frame them in the context of a multi-faith world and how we get into alignment with one another and with the divine, with the spirit, with God in this world. In light of the main ideas of these two books. As some of you may know, I was brought up in a very strict form of Christian fundamentalism for many years, and then I became a pastor. I became deeply interested in interfaith understanding and in multi-faith collaboration in the years and really in the days and hours after September 11th, 2001. I was a pastor in the Washington, D.C. area and found myself kind of plunged into an awful lot of important conversations in the in the months and years after September 11th, 2001. Some years after that, I was invited to be part of something called the Auburn Senior Fellows. And this was a group that was brought together, a group of multi-faith leaders who shared an interest in social justice and social action. And this ended up being just one of the richest experiences of my life. We had a whole wide variety of Christian participants, a number of rabbis, imams, Buddhist teachers, Sikh activists, a couple of Sikh participants, Hindu, just a beautiful array of people of many different traditions. And our only agenda is when they recruited us for this, they said, we'd like to ask you to make a commitment to get together for a 3-day retreat twice a year for the indefinite future. And the only goal was for us to build relationships and seek to know each other and understand each other and see how we might be able to inspire and encourage each other for the common good. And so that has been just an invaluable blessing in my life. And it's made it very hard for me to write books only thinking about members of my own faith tradition. And that, I think, shows up in the 2 books that I'd like to say something about this evening. In Faith After Doubt, obviously, I'm dealing with the issue of doubt. And one of the things you realize when you pay attention to doubt in your religion is that people in other religions are going through very similar experiences of doubt and struggle and questioning in their own tradition. When the book came out, I have a dear friend who is a Hindu environmental activist, and he and I were speaking together on an environmental related subject. But as we were talking and he was asking me about the book Faith After Doubt, he told me a story from his childhood. If you grew up in a Christian background, you may have experienced what I did. I had a Bible storybook that my mother read to me at night before I went to bed. And it would have pictures of Jesus or pictures of Moses or pictures of Mary, and then a little story about them. And they were kind of nice bedtime stories. And although some of the subjects were a little bit gruesome, like I look back now and think, how could you read Noah and the ark to a child before he or she goes to bed, when only a few people end up on the ark and a whole lot of people end up in the flood? But that was a big part of my childhood. And my Hindu friend said to me, when I was a child, I had Bhagavad Gita and Rig Veda and other of the Hebrew script of the Hindu scriptures. I had children's storybooks in my religion too. And he said, I asked my mother one night when she was reading me this storybook, in Hindu art, you always depict gods with blue skin. You may have noticed that if you've seen Hindu art. Just as Christians put a halo around people's heads, it's kind of a strange thing to do when you think about it, but it's an artistic convention. In Hindu art, you have people blue to show that they're divine beings. And so my friend said to his mother, were Krishna and Vishnu and Ganesh and others, were they really blue? And his mother said, yes, they were blue. And he said, well, why have I never seen anyone who's blue today? And she said, don't ask questions, just believe what I tell you. And I thought that is probably a kind of expression that people hear across religious traditions. And children are trying to figure out, am I supposed to take this literally? And all of those experiences that you might think are only your experience in your faith tradition. It turns out people in other faith traditions are having remarkably similar experiences. So when I wrote Faith After Doubt, what I wanted to do is take an interest of mine and try to make it available to people who are going through spiritual struggle. And what I wanted to do is offer a four-stage schema for understanding faith development. And I'd become interested in different theories of human development from my work when I was a college English teacher. But that expanded. I just became sort of psychologically and as an educator interested in human development, how humans learn at different stages, what they're looking for in teachers at different stages. And then as a pastor, I started realizing how much uh, that this understanding of human development played into faith development and helped me understand the drama of doubt that many people of faith experience. So I had done a huge amount of research in this, not for the book, just because I was interested in my life in this subject. And I tried to synthesize a lot of different theorists into this four-stage schema. And I can explain it to you now in the next 8 or 10 minutes or so. And it's so easy. You all will be able to remember it. And I hope it will be useful for you. The four stages, here they are. Simplicity, that's obvious. We'd start with simplicity when we're children. Simplicity, complexity, it's obvious we move from simplicity to complexity. For some reason, I get balloons when I do that. Third, perplexity, simplicity, perplexity. I'm sorry, simplicity, complexity, perplexity. Okay. And that's when the complexity becomes more than you can handle. Simplicity, complexity, perplexity. And then the fourth stage is harmony. And let me give you just a quick overview of how these stages work. And these are reflections not of a particular religion, but they seem to be characteristics of human development uh, that seem to have some similarities across religious traditions. Simplicity tends to be the stage where we all start as children. Um, and it is heavily focused on authority figures because when you're a child you don't know that much, and you have to go to adults that you trust to get answers to your questions. So simplicity is oriented toward authority figures who try to give us simple answers to our questions, and they give them in a very authoritative way. This is the way it is. And things tend to be black or white, us or them, good or bad, friend or enemy, safe or dangerous. Always the world is sorted into two bins that we call dualism. And of course, this makes sense. When you're a child, your parents tell you you can't run out in the street to chase the ball. That's dangerous. You have to stay on the sidewalk. That's safe. Safe and dangerous are a matter of life and death. And that person is a relative. You can trust her. That person is a stranger. You can't trust him. So we tend to get these either or, us, them, very simple rules for life. Um, and simplicity works for a lot of people through their whole lives. Uh, and in fact, my friend and colleague Richard Rohr often says, if great suffering or great love don't come into your life, that initial simple order of simplicity often stays with you for your whole life. I might add, great suffering, great love, uh, a great amount of cross-cultural travel, and a great liberal arts education probably could also take you out of the realm of simplicity very easily. Uh, and so a lot of people stay there their whole lives. Now, when you think about it, the one thing that all children, I'm sorry, the one thing that all people in all religions have in common is that they start out as children. And if children are in need of simple answers to their questions, you can understand how there would be a strong uh, segment of simplicity across religious traditions. Just to tell you a quick example. Some years ago, I was part of an ecumenical Christian group that had, and it was an international group. And it turns out one of the cheapest places in the world when you have people come coming from Africa, Latin America, Australia, Europe, North America. One of the cheapest and easiest places to meet is Thailand. And so we had this international meeting in Thailand. And because this was a group that was oriented toward the poor, and working among the poor and justice for uh, poor and vulnerable and marginalized people, we spent the first few days of our international gathering going way out into the countryside in northern Thailand, and all of us worked with farmers. I worked planting rice for 2.5 days. Other people worked picking peppers, picking corn. We all just did farm work to live among the people. It was an amazing, incredible experience. The first night when we got to this little village, the woman who was our host really wanted us to see the Buddhist, the little small Buddhist shrine. They called it a temple, but it was smaller than a living room in most houses. It was, but it was in this very poor village. And like 10:30 at night, she wakes up the monk and asks him to give us a tour of the of the of the little temple, and we walked with our flashlights through the village because there wasn't electricity. There was an electric light in the temple, and we went inside. And I thought to myself, what a moment. This Buddhist monk, this was not a tourist attraction in any way. This was in the middle of nowhere. This Buddhist monk has an opportunity to teach diverse Christians, Catholic, Protestant, all different kinds of Christians from literally around the world, to introduce them to Buddhism. And so we come in the room, and here was the first thing he said. It's very important. Only men can stand in this area. Women cannot come in this area. Men only. Women have to stay over there. I thought to myself, the first thing we're going to learn from him about Buddhism is something we see in all religions, that, this idea that there are men and women, things men can do, things women can do. This is just something that we see across religious communities on that level of simplicity. But more and more people, I think, at a younger and younger age, are moving out of simplicity, and they move into a second step. And that's the step where they start asking why, and they ask for more complex answers. They're unsatisfied with the simple answers, and they start asking more complex for more complex answers. That's the stage of complexity. And at this stage, the questions of the student take the student to new places. And now you see the before, it was the student asks the teacher a question, and the student has to accept what the teacher says. But when the student says, that doesn't make sense to me, why is it that way? And the student asks a second question and a third question, and now you move into complexity. I remember for myself as a young Christian growing up that I started being unsatisfied with many of the answers that I was given. And I remember, for example, I was in middle school in Sunday school class, and and they were talking about the creation of the world and reading the story from Genesis. And I raised my hand and I said, well, what about evolution? And my teacher, I don't remember his exact words, but it was very close to this. It's very simple. You either believe in God or in evolution. You can't believe in both. And in my, whatever it was, 11, 12-year-old mind, I thought, okay, that's what he says. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. I'm going to think about this on my own. At that moment, I was stepping out of simplicity into complexity. And a lot of people stay in complexity their whole lives, and there's a lot to learn in the stage of complexity. In complexity, people want to gain a lot of information about their religion. And so it's very, you can keep busy learning information for a lot of years of your life. Um, uh, and a lot of people stay in complexity their whole lives. In fact, I would say around the world, it's pretty clear to me. I don't have empirical data on this, but it's but there's a good number of studies on this, that across religious traditions, simplicity and complexity are where the vast majority of people practice their spirituality, their faith. Um, but more and more people, I think, at a younger and younger age, are moving out of complexity into the third stage, perplexity. And perplexity happens when we start asking questions that probably won't have any kind of satisfactory answer for us ever. We start asking questions that there are no simple answers to. And we start realizing that uh, that reality isn't as simple as two categories or five categories or 10 categories. And we start thinking in deeper and more, uh, uh, we might say, well, we start practicing critical thinking. And we find that we can critique not only the simple answers, but the complex answers, and not only other people's answers, but our own answers. And we can even critique our own questions. And when we become self critical of ourselves as individuals, of our religion, of our community, not just other people's religions and communities, when we start to be able to practice that kind of critical thinking, that is our the sign that we're in this third stage of perplexity. Some religious traditions welcome people into perplexity. They see this as an important part of the spiritual journey. Other religious traditions make it very, very hard for people in that third stage. I'll give you just a quick example. I wrote a book some of you may have heard of called Why Did Jesus, Moses, the Buddha, and Muhammad Cross the Road? And when the book came out, I was invited to do a couple of book tours, one of them in England. And when I was in England, um, each night I was in a different city, and in each city they paired me up with a different conversation partner from a different religious tradition. So one night I might be with a rabbi, the next night I might be with an imam, the next night I might be I was with several different kinds of Muslim activists. The next night I might be with a Sufi, more of a mystic. And so it was a very fascinating experience for me. But one of the most fun, well, all of them were really fascinating. But one night, my conversation partner was a woman who was the only Muslim woman in England with a PhD in religious studies at that time. There might be more now, but at that time, she was the only British Muslim woman with a PhD in religious studies. And we went out to dinner before the session. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, um, because in my religious tradition, there are not a lot of women with doctorates in religious studies and who are experts in Muslim theology. She said, I tend to make Muslim male theologians uncomfortable. And she said, the only time I can find people who I feel I can relate to on this level of my professional life, I have to find people of other faiths. And this often happens for people in perplexity. When they feel they don't fit in with people of their own faith, they might look for people who are also in stage 3 perplexity of other faiths, because they find a certain freedom to ask questions and think openly together. Um, and then a lot of people stay in stage 3 for the rest of their life because they never find there's any other place to go. But I think more and more people at a younger and younger age are moving from stage 3 perplexity into stage 4 that I call harmony or solidarity. And when you start to understand that people of other faiths are similar to you, they're on a similar spiritual quest. Their religion has uniquenesses. You don't say all religions are the same. You understand they have different histories and different frameworks of thinking and different, so much difference, but you understand a certain human commonality. And you dare to show human respect to people across difference. And you understand that you've all been through this same journey of simplicity and complexity and perplexity, and you're seeking a way to connect with one another and understand one another. That tends to bring you together to a place of harmony. And when I say harmony, it doesn't mean you agree on everything, but it means you know how to disagree agreeably. You know how to see things differently without seeing one another as good or evil, but to understand that different is just different. And that creates the capacity for solidarity, for mutual understanding, for a different kind of collaboration. Uh, and one way to describe this kind of zone of harmony that exists in every religious tradition is to say this is the part of that tradition that we tend to associate with the mystics, the contemplatives, and often the prophetic or activist wing of the community too, where people work for against injustice and for the common good. And so if that little framework of 4 stages makes sense to you, it might help you understand your own journey. It might help you understand some of what drew you to a group like this with alignment. So I'd like to stop there and see just maybe if you could put in the chat, what is your kind of emotional reaction to me sharing those 4 stages? Do you feel that's interesting? Do you feel that's you're troubled by something there? Do you feel confused? If you could just give me that feedback in the chat, and then that'll give us time if you have a question or if anyone has a question they'd like to ask about those 4 stages, we could explore that together.
Brian, earlier I was telling you we have these weekly sessions of contemplative practices.
Yes.
Since October, November, once a month we set aside those times for not an individual contemplative practice from a particular tradition, but we hold a session called Prayer in a Time of War.
Mm.
And we hope that we are finding that space of harmony there where we can uphold the prayers of one another and be in that space safely and bravely, offer our prayers for peace in amidst time of great loss and frustration and confusion. But that's our goal, is to get to that stage of harmony in that space.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And that probably helps explain so much both why alignment started and why you all have been drawn into it, because you feel yourself being drawn beyond just let's argue about who's right and wrong, and drawn beyond just learning, as interesting as it is to learn the complexities of each other's faith and to go into the deeper, the more complex depths of our differences and similarities, and drawn beyond into asking those agonizing questions of, for example, peace and war, and feeling how there's no simple solution so often, and then we have to hold the pain of there not being a simple solution, and often not being good guys and bad guys, so that we can, put all the blame on one group of bad guys, and you hold that together, and that's what prepares you to share in that solidarity.
And I also really appreciate you mentioning too the understanding that we're not trying to make everybody the same.
Yes.
We're not trying to find what's common. We're trying to find the harmony. Yeah, not the.
Yes.
We've got lovely things in the chat here.
Yes. Yes, thanks for these comments. Someone asked, how can we move from perplexity to harmony? Let me offer a couple of thoughts on that before we move on. I think there are 2 ways that we move from perplexity to harmony. And let me say, for those of you in the Christian tradition, You may have heard a phrase that's associated with the Christian contemplative or mystical tradition called the dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul, in many ways, corresponds to perplexity. The idea of a dark night is you can't see, things don't make sense. Um, uh, you 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 can't see how things fit together. You can't see an answer. And learning to live with the inability to see is a new skill. When you think about it, in simplicity and complexity, you were seeing more, understanding more, making more sense of things. And when you get to a place where you can't make sense of things and you learn how to live with unknowing as well as knowing, or you learn how to live with uncertainty as well as certainty. That skill, in a certain sense, when that skill sinks in deeply enough, and you're then able to see that other people are going through similar processes where they used to be sure of everything, they used to have simple answers for everything. In a certain sense, you develop the capacity to move into stage 4. It's a capacity you didn't have before, but you develop it. I'll give you one other way that I think you develop it. Early in stage 3, perplexity, we tend to be very critical of everybody. In fact, in stage 1 and stage 2, we become critical of other people and other groups, very critical of other religions. Whatever your religion is, we're the good guys, they're all the bad guys. Or your denomination or your sect or whatever, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Um, in stage 3, you become critical. The same criticism you've applied to other groups, you apply to your own group. And you can feel very righteous even when you start criticizing your own religion. And there's so much wrong with them, and they're such hypocrites, and we just find all their flaws. But when we take the critique we've been applying to other people and we apply it to ourselves, and we say, hold it, what am I doing that's better than anybody else? Aren't I just now becoming a judgmental person of judgmental people? And when the critique that we've applied to others, we apply to ourselves. Here's the way I say it. In stage 3, when you become cynical about your own cynicism and skeptical of your own skepticism, and you are critical of your own critique, at that point you become sort of sick of yourself, or you become you instead of feeling proud of yourself, you see something almost ridiculous about yourself. And that has this humbling effect. And when you experience that kind of humbling effect, I think it prepares the way for you to I think it prepares the way for you to then move into harmony. It's not something you have to understand. It's almost a capacity that you develop. I'll give you one other dimension of it. When you used to have easy answers and you feel those easy answers slip through your fingers, and you feel the loss of everything that you learned so far, you realize that losing your faith and losing your clarity and so on is a horrible thing. And then you realize why people hold on to clarity and certainty so much. And in a certain way, you're able to have empathy for the people in simplicity and complexity. And instead of looking down on them, I'm advanced and they're primitive, I'm mature and they're immature, you realize I used to be there too. We're all just human beings going through these changes together. So I hope that helps. Um, uh, Someone said, how does grief impact these 4 stages? And I think this is why when Father Richard Rohr speaks of great suffering and great love, of course, they almost always go together. When you feel enough deep pain yourself, one of 2 things can happen. You either become absorbed in your own pain, or you realize, just as I'm in pain, other people are in pain too. And when your own experience of pain makes you more sensitive to the pain of other people, at that point, I think you grow into a deeper stage. And I think to some degree, it's that one dimension of growth from each stage to another is when you have empathy to the pain that other people are going through. That's what helps you mature from stage one to stage two, from two to three, and from three to four. So uh, I hope that helps. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Robert.
Well, I would find that very interesting, and I wonder if, as we move through the stages and reach harmony, do we not begin to question all over again?
Ah, so well said.
And kind of start again.
Yes.
And because as we get some age
Yes.
and wisdom, we find that we really still don't have the answers.
Yes.
and,
Exactly.
and so this kind of a joy, it seems to me, to be able to go back and start again.
Yes.
Now, I would like to hear your comments on that.
Well, I couldn't have said that better. And in fact, in the book here, the image that I use is I say, imagine a tree, and trees grow taller by actually growing fatter. In my life, I stopped growing taller a long time ago. I just continue growing fatter. But
Yeah.
but when you think about how a tree grows, it has one little ring, and then the next year it adds another ring, and the next year another ring. And so each ring includes the ring and expands beyond it, and includes the ring and expands beyond it. And I think when we get to harmony, and if you live there long enough, I think harmony becomes like your new simplicity. And right when you think, now I have things all figured out, then new levels of complexity face you, and then new levels of perplexity. And I think exactly as you said, that's how this process works. I'll give you an example from my own life. I remember growing up in a Christian fundamentalist setting where we studied the Bible a whole lot. And I was well into my 20s before I realized that there were all of these places in the Bible that said love was the most important thing.
Right.
For example, in the Hebrew scriptures, in Hosea, says God says God desires mercy or compassion and not just sacrifice, right? And not sacrifice. It's said in many, many different places, including Jesus says it, Paul says it, John says it. And so the idea, I remember thinking, that's it. That's the answer. Love is everything. And that might have been me dipping my toe into stage four, because when you understand that love is everything, it changes the rules, it changes everything for you. But you live long enough and you find out understanding love is everything doesn't solve all your problems. And then you're forced to face complexity. And I remember the first time it hit me. I was listening to an African American theologian and philosopher who said, "Whenever I hear people say the word love, I reach for my wallet." And and what she meant is, people use the word love to manipulate you. And she had developed some suspicion around the word love. And I realized, yeah, even the word or concept of love could be abused. And she said, when I hear people say love all the time, I think, what injustice are they trying to cover up? And so I realized, yeah, I face new complexities with love. And so I think the process continues. And I love how you said that, Robert, when you just said you live long enough, and and you discover a joy in not knowing.
Yes.
And it might take a couple rounds of simplicity, complexity, perplexity, harmony. Repeat that process before you start to feel much in the way of joy. But I think that's true. Beautifully said.
Thank you much.
Yeah. Well, uh, let me okay, one more question, and then I'll move on. How about the corresponding life circumstances of individuals and organizations and possible transitions? And where do I find my flock? And there's so much I'd love to say about that. There is a chapter in the book about this matter of 4 stages in community. Let me say what I think we have going on in so many places in our world now is that we have religious communities that are rigid stage 1 communities. If you are in simplicity, you fit in. We have a few that accept people in simplicity and complexity. But once you grow beyond complexity, you often feel that you don't fit in. And one of the things that tends to happen for those people is they find each other, or they have to create spaces for these conversations. And I wouldn't be surprised for some of you if this group isn't one of those kinds of spaces where you feel here's a place I can safely ask questions. Um, and what I hope we can see more of going forward in the future is that we would have not just 4 stage 4 communities for stage. I wish we'd have 4 stage communities where the leaders work from a place of harmony and they understand that people in simplicity need simple, clear answers, but they need simple, clear answers that will help them, that won't lock them in at simplicity, but that will prepare them to move on to complexity and perplexity and harmony when they're ready. Some of you may know there's a great uh, theologian, one of our greatest living theologians in the United States in the Christian faith, named Walter Brueggemann, in my opinion, one of the greatest. And I heard Walter Brueggemann say this perfectly. He said, someone asked him a question about, here he's a very sophisticated theologian with a lifetime of deep research. And someone said, well, how do we teach all this to children? And Walter said, teaching children about faith is like teaching children about sex. And then he just sort of let that sink in. And then he said, you give them an honest answer. You don't give them more than they can handle. And you don't ever tell them something that you'll have to admit was a lie later on. I thought that was pretty good advice to help people, uh, you know, at each stage. Um, so let me move on and talk a little bit about this more recent book, Life After Doom. Um, uh, in a way, thinking about alignment across religious traditions with the 4 stages of faith, you can see how people in each of these different religious communities might be able to find ways that there are elements of simplicity, complexity, perplexity, and harmony in their own faith traditions. Um, uh, by the way, I should tell you, in my work with interfaith leaders of many other traditions, very often people, when they get to know each other, it takes a while for them to trust each other. But very often, here's what they will tell you. The people who are bridging from one faith community to another will tell you that their harshest critics are in their own faith tradition. Because some people in the simplicity zone of their own faith tradition think that anyone who loves and becomes deep friends with people in another tradition are being unfaithful or are betraying their own tradition, right? So it's but when we see this at work across traditions, I think it helps us have some larger sense of what's going on. But here's another dimension of alignment among faith traditions. All of our faith traditions have to live on the same planet. We don't have any, religious colonies on other planets right now. We've all got to live together on this earth. And our relationship with the planet is in serious, serious trouble. And no single religion can solve this problem alone. And that really is what is behind this book, Life After Doom. We're more and more of us are waking up. And when I asked at the beginning about our weather, and many of us talked about extreme heat, by the way, I should apologize. I keep coughing, but I'm just getting over COVID. I promise I won't infect any of you over Zoom. But when we realize we're living on a planet that is in real danger, we know about global warming, and it is one element, a very serious and significant element of a situation that we all face, whatever our religion, whatever our nation, whatever our political party, and whether we believe it's real or not. We're still going to have to deal with it. The results will hit all of us. But it turns out that global warming is just the tip of a very, very big iceberg. In fact, a very big melting iceberg. and if you want a deeper understanding of our environmental crisis, a word that's really worth knowing that I talk about in the book is the word overshoot. And overshoot has a very simple meaning. It means what happens when we suck out more resources from the earth than the earth can replenish, and we pump out more wastes than the earth can detoxify. That's the simple idea. Sucking out more resources than the earth can replenish and pumping out more wastes than the earth can detoxify. And when that happens, every generation leaves the earth a little poorer and a little less healthy than the earth was when they inherited it. And when we have 8 billion, and experts think that we'll probably get to 9 to 10 billion before the end of the century, when our population is growing so rapidly and human beings are taking out more resources and pumping out more wastes than ever before, each individual, most individuals are taking out more than their parents or grandparents did, then we accelerate this problem of overshoot. And the problem of overshoot is a very difficult problem for human beings to face. No single nation can solve it. No single generation can solve it. No single political administration can solve it. It's a long-term problem that requires radical change across all of the sectors of human civilization. And here is another place where I think alignment across our religious communities becomes extremely important. Suddenly we face a problem that technology alone cannot solve, politics alone cannot solve. On the deepest level, we have a challenge of human beings changing their value system and changing their relationship with the earth and with one another in a very short period of time. Our grandparents, well, let me speak for myself. I'm 68 years old. I know I don't look a day over 78, but I'm 68 years old, and my grandparents were born before the word ecology had been invented. And certainly before the field of ecology was recognized. And so they were born in a world where it felt like there were unlimited, infinite resources on a huge, huge planet. And they really didn't think much about how we live within environmental limits, how we avoid overshoot. It just wasn't in anybody's, it was in very few people's minds. Let me say it that way. Very, very few people's minds. And it's still not in many people's minds. For those of us in the United States, I would say it's certainly less than half of our country that has anything close to an understanding of overshoot even in 2024. And so what this means is we're entering a time when we're going to need all of our religious traditions to activate members of all of our religions to understand a problem that our ancestors haven't understood for a very long time. If we go back far enough, I think some of our ancestors understood this on a very local level. But now we're at this place of having to understand this on a planetary level. And I just wanted to tell you a couple of quick stories about this. Well, I'll just tell you one quick story about this, and then open it up. I'll make a couple comments about the book, and then open up for some final questions. Some of you know that I guess it was about I've forgotten how many years ago. Pope Francis came out with a document called Laudato Si. I seem to think it was in 2006, somewhere around there, but it might have been a little later than that. And this document was a letter from Pope Francis to all the people of the world. And the letter basically said, we have to hear the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor. We're harming the earth and we're exploiting the poor, and we have to change our relationship to the earth and to the poor. And I think my personal feeling is it's the most important Christian document since the Reformation and maybe before. I just think it's a historically important document. But when Pope Francis was about to go public with this document, he called together a group of people for a secret meeting at the Vatican. The only reason I know about this, I wasn't invited, but a friend of mine was invited. And on his flight to Rome, he noticed a famous writer who he knows on the flight. And you know how you get up and walk down the aisles? Well, he went over and said hello to her and said, hi, I've read some of your books. And they started talking. And she said, yeah, this is the weirdest thing. She says, I'm not Catholic, but I got this invitation to go to the Vatican to talk about caring for the environment. She says, I'm a Jew, I'm an atheist, and I'm pro-choice. And I got invited to the Vatican. Can you believe it? And so my friend said, well, that's where I'm going too. So they went to the Vatican, and when they got to the meeting, here's what Pope Francis said to them. He said, I have this document coming out. The future of the human race is under great threat unless we hear the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor. He said, as soon as this document comes out, many of my own bishops will oppose me. And that's why I've called you together. I'm asking you for your help in your different religious traditions to try to get this message out. And so after Laudato Si came out, I got an idea. And when I talked to some people about it, they said, it's a good idea. We'll help you, but you have to lead it. And the idea was we went to the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and we had an interfaith gathering. We had leaders of a wide array of Christian traditions to come together and say, we all agree with Pope Francis. We have to hear the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor. We had Muslim leaders, we had Buddhist leaders, we had Hindu, Sikh, Native American, wide array of leaders who came, and each gave beautiful, inspiring speeches about our need to work together across our religious traditions. And I'll just tell you one quick story about this. One of the people involved was a Muslim leader from South Africa named Ibrahim Rasool. And Ibrahim was, after working in the South African government as a member of Nelson Mandela's cabinet, he became an international consultant on peacemaking and justice seeking. And there was a group of Muslim scholars who came together. At the time, it was the most diverse group of Muslim scholars that had ever met together in person. And they met together to talk about a Muslim attitude toward the earth and ecology and the environment. And they all agreed that fossil fuels were wrong. But you understand, so much of the Muslim world gets so much of its wealth from fossil fuels. And they reached an impasse where they all agreed it was real, but they couldn't agree on whether they should do anything about it, and or how to do anything about it. And they called in Ibrahim to be a sort of to help them negotiate and come up with a solution. And he told me, as he met with these people and they more deeply understood the challenge that they were facing, some of them said, if I speak out against fossil fuels, I'll lose my job. I may be kicked out of my country because I'll be seen as an enemy of the regime that gets all of its wealth from fossil fuels. But Ibrahim said to them, do you understand that that the forces of injustice that are harming the poor are the same as the forces of injustice that are harming the earth? And that if you care for the poor, you have to care for the earth, and vice versa. And so this group of scholars came together and signed that statement and sent it out. You may have heard just in the last several months, a second statement was made by an even larger group of Muslim scholars calling for Muslims around the world to bring an end to fossil fuels. And so we're at this time where it's going to take great courage within religious traditions and across religious traditions. And in each religious tradition, there will be people doubling down on the old ways and being in denial about overshoot. And there will be others who are trying to help people see it. And this is another case where we need deep, sincere, passionate alignment across our faith communities. It's not only our future as individuals, future for our children and grandchildren, our future as a species, but really our future for this whole beautiful living earth depends on us getting in alignment and coming together as never before. So let me stop there, and we might have time just for a question or comment or two. I'm grateful for your attention. I see George said, what will be the common elements of post-doom harmony among religious communities? So I don't think we're going to have time to bring enough people from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to make this work. In other words, I don't think we're going to be able to get enough people to that place of harmony. But I think we're going to have enough in harmony from each tradition that can begin to work together and then mobilize people using logic and reason that will make sense to people in simplicity, complexity, and perplexity. So survival or not survival is a very simple concept that people in stage 1 can understand. The complexities of going through a global energy transition, that's enough to keep the stage 2 people really busy. Facing the moral ambiguities and trade-offs that involve great perplexity, that will involve the people in stage 3. So my sense is we're going to need people in stage 4 to try to describe the problem in a way that people of all stages will see that they have a role to play. We're going to have autocrats and authoritarians working against us at every stage in this. And that's going to have to be part of the reality and the strategy too. There will be opposition for sure. Well, maybe that's a good place for me to stop and just say, I hope one or both of these books will be of interest to you. Just as I had those 4 stages in Life After Doom, there are kind of 4 movements. I call them letting go, letting be, letting come, and setting free that shape this book, Life After Doom. And so I hope they'll be of use to you in your own thinking and in your own conversations with others and in our shared work together. So thank you so much for having me.
Grateful. And as you say, the experience of doom brings certain gifts with it of new clarity and a depth of sight. And there's this beautiful quote at the end of your book. I think it's Catherine Hayhock that says,
Hey, hey ho, yes,
Hayho, is that how you pronounce it? Thank
yes,
you. The single most important thing we can do is what we're doing right here, right? To talk about it.
yes, yes.
To
That's
talk
right.
about
Yes.
it.
Well,
So
thank you for inviting me, and it's been a real pleasure.
so incredibly grateful to hear from you. We are honored, truly honored and inspired by this work. And I hope you all, if you haven't, this is what, a month old now.
Yeah.
Just so challenging, inspiring, stirring, so many emotions, but really, really grateful for this latest one, for all of the things that have come before that have led us on our path. And your work is foundational to us coming together across traditions to do what we need to do and to find this alignment.
you.
So we are so grateful. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Brian, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Good night.
Good night.